Before the sirens, before the fire turned the Colorado sky the color of blood and iron, before a single bullet changed everything, there was only the silence of dawn and a young man who carried ghosts no one else could see. Corporal Jake Morrison stood alone on the rifle range as the first pale light touched the peaks of the Rockies. 24 years old, 6'1", dark hair cut to regulation length, brown eyes that had seen too much too soon. A thin scar traced his left jaw, a reminder of Fallujah when he was 16 and stupid enough to lie about his age because his father's memory demanded he become a warrior before he was ready. The rifle felt like an old friend in his hands, an M40A5 sniper rifle, Marine Corps issue. It had belonged to his father once, Staff Sergeant William Morrison, killed in the Gulf War before Jake could remember his face. All Jake had were photographs worn soft at the edges from too much handling, and this rifle, kept clean and oiled, like a sacred thing, like a promise made to a ghost. He settled into position. The familiar ritual, breath control came first. In through the nose, slow and measured, counting to 4. Hold for 2. Out through the mouth, letting the tension drain from his shoulders, his hands, his trigger finger. The target sat 1,000 yards downrange, a black circle on white paper, barely visible in the dim morning light. An impossible shot for most. Child's play for Jake Morrison. His finger found the trigger. Gentle pressure, steady as a heartbeat. No jerking, no anticipation, just the slow, inevitable squeeze until the rifle decided to fire. The shot cracked across the empty range. Through the scope, he watched the bullet punch through dead center. He adjusted half a minute of angle, fired again. Another perfect hit. And another. 5 rounds, 5 holes so close together they formed a single ragged tear in the target's heart. A grouping small enough to cover with a quarter at 1,000 yards. He lowered the rifle and allowed himself one moment of satisfaction. Out here, alone with the weapon in the wind and the mountains that did not judge, he could still be the Marine he used to be. Before the incident, before the transfer, before they took everything that mattered and left him with nothing but anger and ghosts in this rifle that remembered what he tried to forget. A memory surfaced, unbidden. They always did in the quiet moments. Fallujah, 2004. He had been too young to be there, but war does not care about birth certificates or parental consent forms. Marines pinned down in a building, insurgents closing in from 3 sides like wolves smelling blood. Jake on a rooftop 600 yards away, watching through his scope as good men prepared to die, watching as they made their peace and checked their ammunition and prepared for the end. His spotter's voice in his ear, Lance Corporal Davis, 22 years old from Michigan. Too far, Reaper, too much wind, impossible shot. You will just give away our position. We need to fall back. But Jake had not fallen back. He had settled his breathing, calculated the wind, accounted for the Coriolis effect and the rotation of the Earth and a dozen other variables that turned shooting into science and science into art. And he had taken the shot anyway. And then another, and another. 12 shots, 12 enemy fighters down, 12 Marines walked out of that building alive because a 16-year-old kid who should not have been there refused to accept that his brothers had to die. They called him Reaper after that, not because he killed, but because he saved. Because death came for his brothers and he turned it away, one bullet at a time. Because he was the shadow that watched over them from impossible distances and made the impossible possible. The memory faded as the sun climbed higher. He was not Reaper anymore. Just Morrison, just another corporal. The Marine who reported his own lieutenant for criminal negligence. The whistleblower. The troublemaker who could not follow orders even when those orders meant keeping his mouth shut about men dying for no good reason. He packed up the rifle with practiced efficiency, each piece placed in its case with reverence. This rifle had been his father's. Would someday be his son's, if he ever had one. If he ever stopped being angry long enough to build something instead of just surviving. He walked toward the mess hall as the base began to wake around him. Fort Carson sprawled across the Colorado landscape like a small city, a mountain warfare training center that housed everything from basic infantry to classified weapons testing. Remote, isolated, ringed by peaks that made cell phone service unreliable and visitors rare, perfect for soldiers the system wanted to forget. perfect for men like Jake Morrison who wanted to be forgotten. The mess hall smelled like every mess hall he had ever been in. Coffee burnt dark and bitter. Eggs cooked in industrial quantities. That particular staleness of military food prepared by the lowest bidder and served with indifference. Jake grabbed a tray and filled it without looking, without tasting. Fuel, nothing more. He found an empty table in the corner, sat with his back to the wall, eyes on the exits. Old habits from men who lived through ambushes. From men who knew that the only difference between paranoia and preparation was whether you survived. The room filled slowly, soldiers in PT gear, still sweating from morning runs, their breath steaming in the mountain air. Others in ACUs, preparing for the day's training. They talked and laughed and complained about the usual things. The food, the weather, their sergeants, the monotony of garrison life. The thousand small frustrations that made up a soldier's day when no one was shooting at them. No one sat near Jake. He was used to it by now. The space that formed around him wherever he went. The way conversations died when he approached. The way eyes slid away from his. Marines did not forget traitors, even if the traitor was right. Even if the lieutenant, he reported, had gotten men killed through incompetence and cowardice. And the Army had no use for a former Marine who could not follow orders, who put conscience above command, who valued truth above tribal loyalty. A voice cut through the noise, loud and deliberate and meant to carry. There he is, the Marine reject. Jake did not look up. He knew the voice. Staff Sergeant Frank Kowalski, infantry veteran, 34 years old and proud of every hard-earned scar. Polish descent with the kind of thick build that came from years of rucking heavy gear through bad terrain. A good soldier by all accounts, just not a kind one. Heard you got kicked out for friendly fire, Kowalski continued, making sure everyone in the mess hall could hear. Making sure everyone knew what Jake was, what he had done, what he represented. What kind of coward shoots his own guys? What kind of Marine turns on his brothers? The mess hall went quiet. Silverware stopped moving. Conversations died. Soldiers watching, waiting to see if the new guy would rise to the bait. Waiting to see if he would fight or fold or do something interesting enough to break the monotony. Jake kept eating. Eggs that tasted like cardboard. Toast that tasted like nothing. Coffee that tasted like motor oil and regret. He did not taste any of it. Just chewed and swallowed and kept his eyes on his plate because looking up meant engaging and engaging meant fighting. And fighting meant proving Kowalski right. Kowalski laughed, ugly and mean, the kind of laugh that invited others to join. The kind that said, "See, I told you, coward, wash out, not one of us." That is what I thought. All bark, no bite, just another washout playing soldier, wearing the uniform but not earning it. Jake stood slowly, deliberately. He picked up his tray with steady hands, dumped it in the trash with the kind of precision he used for everything, and walked out. Behind him, Kowalski's laughter followed, but so did something else. A few muttered comments, respect for not taking the bait, or maybe just pity for the guy everyone knew was broken beyond repair. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber. Jake walked toward the motor pool, hands in his pockets, thinking about nothing and everything. About Kowalski's words, about the truth buried in his classified file, about Captain Carlos Rodriguez and the promise Jake could never keep, about the weight of the dead and how it never got lighter no matter how far you ran. A voice called his name, deep, authoritative, not hostile. "Corporal Morrison, got a minute?" Master Sergeant William Jackson stood beside a Humvee, arms crossed over his broad chest. At 58, Bull Jackson still looked like he could wrestle a grizzly and come out ahead. 6'3", built like a linebacker gone to seed but still dangerous in the way old warriors were dangerous. Dark skin weathered by decades of sun and combat in places the Army did not officially acknowledge. Eyes that had seen the worst of Vietnam and lived to teach the next generation what survival really cost. "Yes, Master Sergeant," Jake said, coming to attention because Bull Jackson was the kind of NCO you showed respect to, whether you wanted to or not. Bull waved a hand dismissively. "At ease with that formal crap. We are not on parade." He gestured toward the Humvee with a tilt of his head. "Come on, you and me got some unofficial training to do. And before you ask, no, it is not optional." They drove out past the main base, into the mountain training area where the real work happened, where soldiers became warriors or washed out trying. Bull did not speak during the drive, and Jake did not ask questions. You did not question a man like Bull Jackson. You just followed and learned and hoped some of what made him survive 40 years of combat would rub off on you. They stopped at a clearing with a makeshift range set up between two ridges, targets at various distances, wind flags showing the constantly shifting mountain air, natural barriers that forced you to think instead of just shoot. Bull climbed out and grabbed a rifle case from the back, moving with the economy of someone who had done this 10,000 times. I saw you this morning, Bull said, opening the case to reveal another M40. 5 rounds, 1 hole at 1,000 yards. That is not good shooting. That is exceptional shooting. The kind you only see from people who have done it when it counted. Just practice, Master Sergeant. Bull. Call me Bull. Everyone does except second lieutenants and people who do not know better. He handed Jake the rifle. And that was not just practice. That was muscle memory from real combat. The kind you only get from making those shots when other people's lives depend on it, when you do not get a second chance. Jake said nothing. What was there to say? That he had made those shots in Fallujah when he was 16? That he had made them in Syria when he was 22? That he had made them 100 times in between, in places that did not exist on maps, against enemies whose faces he still saw when he closed his eyes? Bull studied him for a long moment, really looked at him. Not the way Kowalski looked, with contempt and suspicion, but the way sergeants look at soldiers they think might be worth saving. You did not cause that friendly fire incident, did you, son? The question hung in the air like smoke, like the ghosts Jake carried. He looked down at the rifle in his hands. His father's rifle had felt the same way. Heavy with responsibility, heavy with consequence, heavy with the weight of every shot that could not be taken back. No, Master Sergeant, I did not. Bull, no, I did not cause it. So what happened? Jake thought about lying, about giving the sanitized version that would not make waves. But Bull's eyes were steady and patient and held the kind of understanding that came from seeing too much of war's ugly underside. I reported the lieutenant who ordered it, who ordered Marines to fire on a vehicle that was clearly marked as friendly, who got 3 soldiers killed because he panicked and made a bad call and then tried to cover it up. Marines do not forgive whistleblowers, not even when the whistleblower is right. Bull nodded slowly, not surprised, just sad in the way old warriors get sad when they see the same story repeat for the 1,000th time. The Corps' loss is our gain. He pointed toward the targets downrange. Now show me that Marine marksmanship. Show me what Reaper can do. For the next hour, Jake shot while Bull observed. Different ranges, different positions. Prone, sitting, kneeling, standing. Moving targets. Wind calculations. Elevation adjustments. The full spectrum of sniper craft. Bull asked questions, made suggestions, pushed him to think beyond the mechanics of shooting and into the philosophy of it. When to shoot, when to wait, when to walk away because the shot was not worth the cost. Finally, Bull called a break. They sat on the Humvee's tailgate, drinking water from canteens that tasted like plastic and watching the mountains breathe with the wind. You ever been in a situation where doing the right thing cost you everything? Bull asked, not looking at Jake, looking at the mountains, at the sky, at something beyond the present. Jake thought about it, really thought about it. Yes, Master Sergeant. Bull, yes, in Syria. Captain Rodriguez. He was my commanding officer. Good man, best officer I ever served under. He died because I followed orders when I should have broken them. Died because I was too disciplined to do what needed doing. And then I reported the lieutenant who refused to authorize a rescue attempt. Got vindicated, lost my career anyway. So yes, I know what that costs. What did you learn? That doing the right thing is not enough. That the system protects itself. That truth is less important than loyalty. That I will never be a Marine again no matter how good I am. Bull was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a flask. Old, dented, carried through wars. Bourbon. Good for what ails you. Also good for cutting through bullshit. He took a sip, offered it to Jake. Jake took a small sip. It burned going down, warm and real and honest in a way nothing else was anymore. I was 19 when I got to Vietnam, Bull said, still staring at the mountains. Quezon, 1968. You know what that was? Yes, Master Sergeant. Bull. One of the longest sieges in the war, 77 days. Damn right, 77 days surrounded by NVA regulars who wanted us dead, who wanted to overrun us and make a statement. Outnumbered 10 to 1, outgunned, low on ammunition and food and hope, scared out of our minds every single day. Bull took another sip. I had a gunnery sergeant, old guy, maybe 40, ancient to us kids who thought we were immortal. Gunny Washington, he told me something I never forgot. He said, son, fear is natural. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing your job anyway. And we do not run because our brothers need us. We stay because that is what warriors do. Bull looked at Jake now, really looked at him. That gunny died saving me. Took a mortar fragment meant for my stupid 19-year-old ass. Could have lived if he stayed in cover. But he came out to drag me to safety because I was pinned and bleeding and too dumb to crawl. I have spent 40 years trying to honor what he gave me. What did he give you? Jake asked quietly. Time. Time to become the man I needed to be. Time to save other brothers. Time to learn that this job is not about glory or medals or proving how tough you are. It is about buying time for the next generation. Passing on what we learned in blood so they do not have to learn it the same way. Bull's voice went soft, almost tender. That is what this job is, son. Being the bridge between the dead and the living, teaching the lessons the dead paid for. Jake thought about Captain Rodriguez, about time he did not have, about promises he could not keep, about the weight of survivors' guilt that pressed down like gravity. What if the brothers do not want you, he asked quietly. What if they see you as the problem, as the traitor, as the reason good men died? Bull's hand came down heavy on his shoulder, firm, paternal, the weight of someone who understood. Then you protect them anyway. That is what warriors do. Not for glory, not for thanks, not for recognition, but because it is right, because someone has to, because if we do not, who will? He squeezed once and let go. You got that warrior in you, Morrison. I saw it this morning, I see it now. Question is, you ready to let him out again? Ready to be Reaper when these men need him? Or you gonna let Kowalski and men like him define who you are? Before Jake could answer, his radio crackled. Static, then a young voice, breathless with excitement and something else. Fear, maybe, or the kind of adrenaline that comes from finding something you were not supposed to find. Corporal Morrison, this is Private Martinez. You there? Jake keyed the mic. Morrison here. What is it, Martinez? Sir, I found something weird near the south perimeter fence. Something that does not belong. Could you take a look? Master Sergeant Jackson, too, if he is with you. Bull and Jake exchanged glances. The old sergeant's eyes narrowed. Years of combat instinct kicking in. South perimeter. That is the classified testing area, where they keep the prototype weapons. Why is a private poking around there? Let us find out, Jake said. They drove back to base faster than regulations allowed, but not fast enough to draw attention. Bull's hands were steady on the wheel, but his jaw was tight. Jake recognized that look. The look of a man who had lived through too many surprises to believe in coincidence. Private Danny Martinez waited by the fence, a skinny, 19-year-old kid from Texas who still had baby fat in his cheeks and probably lied about his age the same way Jake had. He looked nervous as they approached, young, scared, but trying hard to be professional. Show us, Bull said. Not unkind, just direct. Danny led them to a section of fence near a drainage culvert. At first glance, nothing seemed wrong. Chain link, razor wire, standard perimeter security. But then Jake saw it, saw what Danny had seen. Boot prints in the soft earth near the culvert. Fresh, recent, size 11, maybe 12. Heavy tread pattern, kami. The kind favored by military contractors. The kind worn by professionals who knew how to move quiet but left traces anyway because no one was perfect. And there, half buried in mud, a small black device the size of a cigarette pack. Matte finish, no markings, professional grade. Bull picked it up carefully with a handkerchief, turned it over. His expression darkened. Communications relay, Russian-made, current generation. The kind Spetsnaz contractors use for coordinating operations. This is not old training equipment. This is active hardware. Jake felt his stomach drop, felt the familiar electric tingle of danger close by. He knew that equipment, had seen it before in Syria. In the compound where Rodriguez died and Jake became something other than a Marine. We need to report this, now. To who? Kowalski's voice came from behind them, sharp, hostile. The staff sergeant approached with two other soldiers, his expression somewhere between skeptical and openly mocking. You three got nothing better to do than play spy games? What is this? Some kind of attention grab, Morrison? We found evidence of intrusion, Bull said calmly. Years of dealing with blowhards keeping his voice level. Russian comms device near a secure area, fresh boot prints. Someone has been surveilling this base recently. Kowalski snorted. Could be old training equipment, could be anything. We run joint exercises all the time. Russians, NATO, every alphabet soup you can think of. Hell, we probably left that there ourselves during some drill nobody bothered to log properly. Jake met his eyes. This is current generation tech, not surplus, not training equipment, active operational hardware. And those boot prints are less than 24 hours old. Someone is watching us, someone professional. Sure they are. Just like you kept your Marine unit secure when you reported your own lieutenant. Kowalski stepped closer, invading Jake's personal space, trying to intimidate, trying to provoke. You know what we call guys like you? Traitors. Paranoid traitors who see threats everywhere because they cannot handle the guilt of betraying their own. And traitors do not belong here, not in my army. That is enough, Staff Sergeant, Bull said, steel in his voice now, the kind of command presence that made even blowhards shut up and listen. You will stand down and you will show respect, or you will find yourself explaining to Colonel Hayes why you ignored a potential security breach. But Kowalski was not done, pride and hostility driving him past good judgment. Marines are arrogant, always have been. Think they are special. Think they are better than real soldiers who do not wash out at the first sign of moral complexity. He shoved Jake's shoulder. Not hard, just enough to make a point. But you are not special, are you, Morrison? You are just a washout playing dress-up, wearing a uniform you do not deserve. Jake did not move, did not react. His voice came out flat and cold, controlled. The kind of control that came from knowing he could kill Kowalski in 3 seconds and choosing not to. I do not think I am special, Staff Sergeant. I know I am trained. There is a difference, a big one, and I am offering you a chance to walk away before you do something stupid. Yeah, prove it. Anytime, any place. Kowalski smiled like a wolf that thought it had cornered prey. Jim, 1800 hours. We will see what a Marine reject can do against a real soldier. We will see if you are as tough as you act or if you are all talk like every other whistleblower I have met. He walked away, his friends following. Danny looked worried, young enough to think fights solved anything. But Bull just nodded slowly, reading the situation with 40 years of experience. You sure about this, son? Jake watched Kowalski go, watched the swagger, the confidence, the certainty that he was right and Jake was wrong. I have got nothing to prove, not to him, not to anyone, but maybe he needs to learn something. What is that? That I fight for brothers, not ego. That fighting is not about winning, it is about protecting what matters. And maybe if I am lucky, that I am not the enemy he thinks I am. Bull's smile was small and proud. All right then, let us get this device to the Lieutenant Colonel. And Morrison? Yes, Master Sergeant? Do not kill Kowalski. I need him to pass his next PT test, unit readiness and all that. Jake almost smiled. Almost. They took the device to Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Hayes, the base commander. Hayes was 52, graying at the temples, with the kind of tired eyes that came from too many years managing budgets and politics instead of leading soldiers. He had served with Bull in Desert Storm, which bought them entry into his office without an appointment and with some measure of trust. Hayes listened to their report, examined the device with a scrutiny that suggested he knew more than he was letting on inside. The sigh of a commander caught between duty and deniability, between doing the right thing and keeping his career intact. Probably just old equipment from a training exercise. We run joint ops all the time. Russians, NATO, you name it. Equipment gets left behind. Contractors are sloppy. This is probably nothing. Sir, with respect, that is current generation technology, Jake said, keeping his voice level. And those boot prints were fresh. Within the last 48 hours, someone has been conducting surveillance on this base, on a secure facility. That is not nothing. Do you know how many false alarms we get out here, Corporal? Hayes leaned back in his chair, tired, defensive. Hunters, hikers, local teenagers playing commando, contractors who forget to log their training equipment. I get reports every week about suspicious activity that turns out to be absolutely nothing. And I cannot put the base on alert every time someone finds a mysterious device near the fence. Sir, I have seen this equipment before, Jake pressed. In Syria, Russian Spetsnaz contractors use it for coordinating assaults, for timing attacks, for Corporal Morrison. Hayes's voice went hard, cold, the voice of a commander who had made up his mind. You have been here 3 weeks. In that time, I have received multiple complaints about your attitude, about your inability to integrate with your unit, about your paranoia and your tendency to see threats where none exist. And now you are bringing me conspiracy theories about Russian commandos operating in Colorado, in friendly territory, on American soil. He leaned forward. I understand you had a rough exit from the Marines. I understand there is trauma there, but you need to let that go. This is not Syria. This is a training base in the middle of Colorado. The biggest threat we face is black bears getting into the trash and soldiers getting drunk in town. I am not putting this base on alert because of your paranoia. Dismissed. Jake felt Bull's hand on his arm, a gentle warning. They left. Outside, Danny looked like he wanted to say something but did not know what. Bull just shook his head, the universal gesture of old sergeants who had seen this movie too many times. Commander has pressures we do not see, Bull said quietly. Budgets, politics, brass breathing down his neck about readiness and efficiency. He cannot afford to be wrong, cannot afford to look foolish. So he chooses to believe the comfortable lie instead of the uncomfortable truth. It is what commanders do when they have been away from the field too long. Even when something is wrong, Jake asked? Even when men might die? Bull's expression was grim, ancient. Especially then, come on, you got a few hours before your date with Kowalski. Get some chow, rest. And Morrison? Yes, Master Sergeant? Trust your gut. It has kept you alive this long. Do not stop listening to it just because some colonel does not want to hear it. Jake spent the afternoon in his barracks, cleaning weapons and thinking. The rifle disassembled before him, each piece laid out with precision. Muscle memory from 1,000 repetitions. His hands moved while his mind wandered, processing, analyzing, planning. He thought about Captain Rodriguez, about Syria 2 years ago, about the mission that changed everything. They had been Force Recon Marines, the best of the best, the tip of the spear. Jake's team got tasked with a raid on a suspected weapons depot supposedly run by ISIS remnants. Intelligence said light resistance, a simple hit, confirm the weapons, call in airstrike, exfiltrate. Simple, clean, easy. Intelligence was catastrophically wrong. The depot was not lightly defended. It was a trap, a perfectly executed ambush by Russian contractors working for whoever paid the most. Spetsnaz trained, professional soldiers who made Taliban fighters look like amateurs. Rodriguez had been Jake's commanding officer, 38 years old, 2 kids, a wife who taught 3rd grade. He told corny dad jokes and took his coffee black and believed in doing things by the book because the book was written in blood and ignoring it meant dying stupidly. Jake respected him completely, would have followed him anywhere, did follow him into that valley where death waited. The mission went sideways from the start. The moment they breached the compound perimeter, machine gun fire erupted from 3 sides. Mortars walked across their position. Jake saw it happening in slow motion, saw Rodriguez recognize the trap, saw him make the hardest call a commander can make. Rodriguez's voice over the radio, clear, calm, final. All units, fall back. This is a coordinated ambush. I will cover the retreat. Do not argue. Do not come back for me. That is an order. Move now. Jake had wanted to go back for him, had grabbed his gear, ready to run into hell, but his teammates pulled him away, held him down, told him orders were orders, told him Rodriguez was making his choice and they had to honor it, had to respect it, had to live because Rodriguez was buying that life with his own. So they ran, and Jake listened to the whole thing on intercepted enemy radio. Rodriguez fighting with the last of his ammunition, fighting hand-to-hand when the bullets ran out, getting captured alive because he was too good to kill easily, being tortured for information he refused to give, reciting name, rank, serial number over and over like a mantra, like a prayer, until his voice broke and he could barely whisper. And then the sound Jake heard in his nightmares, the single gunshot that ended it. Professional, clean, no cruelty, just an enemy commander doing his job. Jake learned later that the man who pulled the trigger was Alexei Volkov, 22 years old, son of Colonel Viktor Volkov, legendary Spetsnaz commander. A good soldier by all accounts, just fighting for the wrong side. Or maybe there were no right sides. Maybe there were just sides, and you picked one and lived or died with that choice. Jake finished reassembling the rifle. Checked the action. Perfect, as always. His hands shook slightly. Post-traumatic stress, the gift that kept giving. A knock on his door. Danny Martinez stood there looking nervous. "Corporal, it is almost 1800. The thing was Staff Sergeant Kowalski." "I remember, Danny. You do not have to do this. He is just trying to make a point, trying to prove something. You could just not show up. No one would blame you." Jake stood, stretched. His body ached from old injuries that never quite healed right. "I am not doing this for Kowalski, Danny. I am doing it because sometimes you have to show people who you are instead of telling them. Sometimes the only way to earn respect is to take a beating and keep getting up. And maybe, just maybe, Kowalski will learn that fighting is not about winning. It is about protecting what matters." They walked to the gym together. Word had spread. Soldiers lined the walls, waiting to see the Marine reject get humbled by a real Army veteran. Waiting for entertainment, waiting for blood. Bull stood near the sparring mat, arms crossed, expression neutral. He caught Jake's eye, nodded once. Permission. Trust. The kind of support that meant more than words. Kowalski was already there, stripped to PT gear, shadowboxing, showing off, making sure everyone saw how strong he was, how fast, how dangerous. He saw Jake and grinned. "Ready to learn some respect, Morrison?" Jake removed his blouse, folded it carefully, set it aside. "I already know respect, Staff Sergeant. Question is, do you?" They squared off with a mat. No gloves, no rules beyond do not kill each other. Just two men and whatever happened next. Kowalski came in hard, all aggression and power. He was bigger, heavier, stronger. Used to winning through brute force and intimidation. His first punch was a haymaker designed to end the fight immediately. To prove his dominance, to show everyone that Marines were overrated and Morrison was just another washout playing soldier. Jake slipped it by inches, moved like water around Kowalski's aggression, counterpunched once, twice, sharp jabs to the ribs, not trying to hurt, just to teach, not trying to win, just to survive. Kowalski roared and charged like a wounded bull. Jake sidestepped, used the bigger man's momentum against him, sent him stumbling past. The watching soldiers murmured. This was not going how they expected. "Stand still and fight," Kowalski snarled. "Fighting is not about standing still," Jake said calmly. "It is about staying alive, about protecting your brothers, about ending fights fast so everyone goes home." They circled. Kowalski feinted left, came right. Jake read it like a book. Blocked, countered. His fist caught Kowalski on the jaw, snapping his head back. The staff sergeant staggered but did not fall. Respect flickered in Kowalski's eyes now. Recognition that this was not going to be easy. That the Marine reject was not a reject at all. That Jake Morrison was exactly what Bull Jackson saw in him. A warrior. And then anger. They traded blows for 5 minutes that felt like hours. Kowalski's power against Jake's precision. Experience against training. Pride against discipline. Neither man willing to quit. Neither man willing to give the other satisfaction. Finally, Jake saw his opening. Kowalski overextended on a jab, dropping his guard for a fraction of a second. Jake moved inside, swept his leg, took him down hard. Kowalski hit the mat with a grunt that knocked the air from his lungs. Jake could have finished it, could have stood over him like a conqueror, could have proved his dominance. Instead, he offered his hand. Kowalski stared at it. The gym went silent. Every eye on them waiting to see what happened next, waiting to see if pride would win or if something better might emerge. Slowly, grudgingly, Kowalski took the hand. Let Jake pull him up. "You fight like you have something to prove," Jake said quietly, so only Kowalski could hear. "What else is there? Brothers to protect. That is what else. That is why we train. Why we fight. Not to prove we are tough, but to make sure the people who depend on us get to go home. Jake stepped back, spoke louder. You are a good fighter, Staff Sergeant. Strong, experienced, dedicated, but fighting is not about winning. It is about making sure your brothers survive, about being the shield they need, about being better than your worst impulses. Kowalski's expression was unreadable. Then, surprising everyone, he nodded, slowly, thoughtfully. Maybe. Maybe I got some things to learn. He looked at the watching soldiers. Show is over. Back to your barracks. As the crowd dispersed, Bull approached. His eyes held something like pride, like satisfaction, like maybe his instinct about Jake Morrison was right. Not bad, son. Not bad at all. He will still hate me tomorrow, Jake said. Maybe, but tonight he respects you. And respect is where everything else starts. Trust, loyalty, brotherhood. You just planted a seed. Whether it grows depends on what you do next. They walked outside into the cooling evening. The mountains loomed dark against a purple sky. Somewhere an owl called hunting, the eternal rhythm of predator and prey. Master Sergeant, can I ask you something? Shoot! When you were in Vietnam, did you ever feel like you were fighting the wrong battle? Like the real enemy was not the NVA, but the system itself, the lies, the politics? Bull stopped walking, looked up at the stars beginning to emerge, was quiet for a long moment. Every damn day, he said finally. Every single day I wondered what the hell we were doing there. Whether we were the good guys or just another empire pretending our imperialism was somehow noble. Whether the boys dying around me were dying for something real or just for politicians who would not know a firefight from a football game. He looked at Jake, but then I would look at the men next to me, boys, really, 18, 19 years old, scared, homesick, trying their best in an impossible situation. And I would realize that the politics did not matter. The reasons did not matter. What mattered was keeping those boys alive long enough to go home, keeping them sane enough to build something after the war. That was my mission. Not defeating communism, not winning hearts and minds, just getting my brothers home alive. Jake nodded slowly, understanding. And that is what you have been doing ever since. Every day for 40 years. Teaching, training, passing on what I learned so the next generation does not have to pay the same price. And you know what? Some of them still die. Some of them still come home broken. But some of them survive because I taught them to survive. Some of them go on to teach others. That is the mission, son. Being the bridge, buying time, keeping the chain unbroken. What if I am not good enough? What if I fail like I failed Rodriguez? Bull's hand came down on his shoulder. You did not fail Rodriguez. He made his choice. He bought time for his Marines. That was his job, his honor, his sacrifice. Now you carry that forward. You use what he bought you. You become worthy of that sacrifice by helping others. That is how you honor the dead. You keep the living alive. Before Jake could respond, his radio crackled. Hayes' voice. Urgent. Afraid. All units. This is not a drill. Multiple breaches detected on perimeter sensors. Unknown hostile forces approaching from multiple directions. All personnel to defensive stations. Repeat, this is not a drill. Bull and Jake locked eyes. The old sergeant's expression went hard. Combat mode. 40 years of training kicking in instantly. You were right, Bull said. Someone was watching. They ran. Behind them, Fort Carson began to wake to nightmare. Soldiers scrambling from barracks. Alarms wailing. Officers shouting contradictory orders. The base transforming from peaceful garrison to combat zone in the space of heartbeats. And Jake Morrison, the youngest on the base, the Marine reject, the whistleblower who nobody wanted, ran toward the sound of gunfire. Ran toward danger. Ran toward the moment he would become everything Bull Jackson saw in him. The moment he would stop being the ghost and become the guardian. The world became fire and thunder. Mortars slammed into Fort Carson with the precision of a surgeon's knife. East Barracks, West Armory, command vehicles, each explosion perfectly placed to maximize chaos and minimize escape. Whoever planned this attack knew the base layout better than most of the soldiers who lived here. Jake hit the ground as a round punched through the command center's roof. Shrapnel screamed through the air. Someone cried out. The lights died, plunging them into darkness cut only by emergency strips and the orange glow of fires outside. Bull was already moving. He grabbed Lieutenant Colonel Hayes by the shoulder, pulling him toward the reinforced corner of the room. Years of combat reflexes taking over. "Get down, sir." Hayes went, no argument. A colonel who survived Desert Storm knew when to listen to his master sergeant. Jake crawled toward the tactical display, now dark and useless. Through the window, he could see soldiers scrambling, some toward defensive positions, others just running. Panic spreading like infection. He recognized the pattern immediately. Textbook Spetsnaz assault doctrine. Shock, overwhelm, exploit confusion. "We need to stop this bleeding," Jake said. His voice cut through the ringing in everyone's ears. Calm, steady, the voice of someone who had been here before. "They want chaos. We give them order." Hayes looked at him. Blood trickled from a cut on the colonel's forehead. "What do you suggest, Corporal?" "Fall back to inner perimeter. Consolidate forces. Turn this into a defensive battle instead of a slaughter. Make them come to us on ground we choose. That means abandoning the outer buildings." "Those buildings are already lost, sir. The men inside them are not. Not yet." Jake met Hayes' eyes. "Sir, I have seen this exact assault pattern before. Syria 2022. Russian contractors hit our forward base the same way. We lost 30 men because we tried to hold everything. Spread too thin. They picked us apart." Hayes made the call in his head. Jake saw the moment the officer became the warrior he used to be. Before the desk, before the politics. Before command meant managing budgets instead of leading soldiers. "Do it. Master Sergeant Jackson, get our people to the inner wall. Morrison, you are with me." They moved through hell. Smoke turned the morning into twilight. Fires burned in a dozen places, black columns rising into a sky that should have been blue and peaceful. The smell hit Jake like a physical thing. Burning fuel, burning plastic, burning flesh. That last smell, Swedish and wrong, the one that haunted veterans in their sleep. Bodies lay scattered, some moving, crying for medics, some still, too still. Jake recognized a few faces. Private Chen from Supply, Sergeant Williams from Motor Pool. Good soldiers who woke up this morning thinking about breakfast and training and the mundane rhythm of military life. Jake forced himself not to look too closely, not to count them, not yet. Later there would be time for the dead. Right now, the living needed him. A group of soldiers huddled behind an overturned Humvee, pinned down by fire from the ridge. Young faces streaked with dirt and terror. They looked up as Jake and Hayes approached, and Jake saw it in their eyes. That desperate hope that someone, anyone, knew what to do. "Sir," a sergeant Jake did not recognize, blood running from his ear. Concussion, probably. "They have the high ground. Every time we move, they cut us down. We have already lost 5 trying to reach the armory." Jake scanned the ridge, muzzle flashes marking enemy positions, professional spacing, interlocking fields of fire, disciplined rate of fire, conserving ammunition. These were not insurgents with AKs spraying bullets and hoping. These were soldiers who knew their business, who trained for this, who had probably done this exact assault on other bases in other countries. "Smoke," Jake said. "We need smoke, thick and fast." "Smoke grenades are in the armory," the sergeant said, "which is currently on fire and maybe 15 seconds from cooking off all the ammunition inside." Jake thought fast, his mind racing through options, discarding bad ones, finding the least terrible choice. Tire fire, black smoke, thick as hell. Bull, that ammunition truck by the motor pool. The diesel one with the flat tire. If we light the tire and dump oil on it, it will burn hot and dirty. Give us a smoke screen. Bull understood immediately. The old sergeant's eyes lit up with the kind of fierce joy that comes from finding a solution in chaos. "Give us cover, 60 seconds. He disappeared into the smoke with 2 other soldiers before anyone could argue. Jake turned to the pin squad, reading their faces. Scared, exhausted, but still here, still fighting. That counted for something. When that smoke goes up, you move. Fast and low. Inner perimeter. Do not stop for anything. Do not be a hero. What about wounded? A young private, maybe 20, clutching his rifle like a lifeline. Jake met his eyes, told him the hard truth. Grab anyone you can carry, but do not die trying to save someone already gone. The dead do not need your help. The living do. It was brutal, cold. The kind of calculation that kept more men alive in the long run, but felt like murder in your soul. The sergeant nodded slowly, understanding the terrible mathematics of triage under fire. 40 seconds. Jake risked a look over the Humvee. Enemy forces moving down the ridge, not rushing, taking their time. Professional bound and overwatch. One team moves while another covers. Textbook. Confident. They thought this fight was already won. They were wrong, but they did not know it yet. 30 seconds. Movement to his left. Danny Martinez, carrying Jake's M40 rifle and looking like he might throw up or pass out or both. His hands shook. His eyes were too wide. But he was here, not running, not hiding. Running toward the sound of gunfire when every instinct screamed to run away. That took a kind of courage no amount of training could teach. Danny, what are you doing? You said get to the armory. It exploded. So I came to find you. He held out the rifle with trembling hands. Figured you might need this more than I do, Corporal. Despite everything, despite the fire and death and chaos, Jake felt something warm in his chest. This scared kid had run toward the fight to bring him a weapon, had put his life at risk for someone who was practically a stranger 3 days ago. Good man. Now stay close and do exactly what I say. Not approximately what I say, exactly. Yes, Corporal. 20 seconds. The tire fire erupted with a roar that shook the ground. Black smoke geysered upward, so thick you could almost lean on it. The kind of toxic, oily smoke that made your eyes water and your lungs burn. Bull emerged from the darkness like a ghost, his face black with soot, grinning like a madman. Move, move, move! They ran, all of them, through smoke so dense Jake could barely see his own hands. Lungs burning, eyes watering. But moving, always moving, because stopping meant dying. He could hear the others around him, boots pounding, ragged breathing, someone praying in Spanish, someone else cursing in a continuous stream. Bullets cracked overhead. Random fire. The enemy shooting blind into the smoke, hoping to get lucky. Someone grunted and went down. 2 soldiers grabbed him without breaking stride, dragged him along. No man left behind, the creed that held when everything else fell apart. They burst out of the smoke into the inner compound. Other groups arriving from different directions, materializing out of the toxic cloud like refugees from hell. Bull was already there, organizing them with hand signals and barked orders. Defensive positions, fields of fire, ammunition distribution. The old sergeant moving with the economy of someone who had done this 100 times in jungles half a world away. The inner wall was not much. Concrete barriers and sandbags left over from training exercises. But it was something. A line to hold. A place to make a stand. Something the enemy had to come through, which meant something they could defend. Jake found a position with good sight lines to the ridge. Set up the M40 on a sandbag rest. Checked the chamber. Loaded. Ready. Danny crouched beside him, hands still shaking, but steady enough. You ever spot for a sniper? Jake asked, his voice calm and conversational, like they were on a range instead of fighting for their lives. No, Corporal. First time for everything. You see that rangefinder? He handed Danny the equipment, showed him how to call distances and wind. Kept his voice calm and even, patient like a teacher, because fear fed on fear, but calm was contagious too. You are going to call out the ranges. I am going to take the shots. Simple as that. Corporal Morrison? Yeah, Danny? Are we going to die? Jake thought about lying, about saying something reassuring and false. Decided Danny deserved better. Deserved the truth, even if the truth was hard. Some of us might. War does not care about fair. But not you. Not if I have anything to say about it, and I have a lot to say about it. He settled behind the rifle, found the rhythm that had kept him alive through Fallujah and Syria and every other hellhole where men tried to kill him. Breathing, slow and controlled, heartbeat, steady as a metronome, the world narrowing to the scope and the target and the space between. The enemy was advancing, cautious but confident. Professional soldiers who had done this 100 times before. They moved in teams, covering each other, using terrain like they had studied it for weeks, because they probably had. This attack was not spontaneous. It was planned, rehearsed, executed with the kind of precision that came from intelligence and preparation. Range, Jake said. Danny checked, fumbling with the rangefinder. 850 meters. Wind? Left to right, maybe 5 miles per hour, maybe 6. Good enough. Watch my trace. Tell me where I hit. Jake found a target, an enemy soldier moving between cover positions, leading his team with hand signals, probably an NCO, squad leader or team leader. Take him out and the team loses coordination, even if just for a few seconds. And in combat, seconds were everything. The shot felt perfect. The rifle barely moved against his shoulder. Recoil absorbed. Follow through automatic. Through the scope, Jake saw the man drop. His team suddenly leaderless, confused. Dead center. Danny breathed, his voice filled with something between awe and horror. Next target, keep calling. For the next 10 minutes, Jake worked methodically. The way his father must have worked in the Gulf. The way Rodriguez worked in Syria. The way snipers had worked since someone first figured out that hitting from distance was better than dying up close. 8 shots, 7 hits, 1 miss when the wind gusted unexpectedly and the bullet went wide. Each shot carefully chosen. Team leaders, machine gunners, officers giving orders, anyone coordinating the attack. Decapitation strikes, not to kill for killing's sake, but to break command and control, to turn a coordinated assault into confused individuals wondering what to do next. The enemy advanced slowed, then stopped. Men taking cover, realizing someone was picking them off with surgical precision. Confusion spreading. The same confusion they had used as a weapon now turned against them. Over the radio, Bull's voice, gruff but controlled. Morrison, nice shooting, but we have a problem. What kind of problem, Master Sergeant? The armor kind. 8 BTRs coming up the access road, maybe 10 minutes out, and we do not have anything that can stop them. Jake lowered the rifle, scanned the battlefield with binoculars. Bull was right. 8 armored personnel carriers, Russian-made, rumbling toward the base like mechanical monsters. Each one could carry 10 soldiers and had a 30mm cannon that could punch through concrete like it was cardboard. If those vehicles reached the inner wall, the fight was over. The base was over. Everyone was over. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes' voice came over the radio, strained but controlled, fighting to keep the fear out of his voice. All units, fall back to the central compound. Prepare for vehicle assault. Get me anyone with anti-tank training. Sir, Jake said into his radio, request permission to engage the armor. With what, Corporal? Strong language? We have exactly 0 functional AT-4s. The armory that had them is currently a smoking crater. With terrain, sir, that access road has to pass through the narrow valley between Ridge 7 and Ridge 8. If we can collapse the sides, trap them in a kill box, bury them. Silence. Hayes was thinking, calculating, weighing impossible options. What do you need? Explosives, C4 if we have it, shape charges, anything that goes boom, and someone who knows demolitions. That would be me, Kowalski's voice cut in over the radio, gruff but steady. I did 3 years as combat engineer before going infantry. I can blow up just about anything if you give me the tools. Jake felt surprise, then gratitude. Staff Sergeant, you willing to plant charges under fire? If it means keeping those rust buckets out of my base, hell yes. Where do you want them? Meet me at the armory ruins. 5 minutes. Danny, you stay here. No, sir, I'm coming with you. Danny, this is not a request. This is an order. You stay on this wall and you provide overwatch. The kid's jaw set. Stubborn, scared but determined, something shifting in his eyes, not quite courage yet, but the seed of it taking root. Corporal, you said I need to be a soldier. Well, soldiers do not let their brothers go alone, sir. Jake looked at him, saw something he recognized, the same thing he had seen in the mirror at 16, lying about his age to join the Marines, the need to prove something, not to anyone else, to himself. To the voice inside that asked if he was good enough, brave enough, man enough. All right, but you do exactly what I say, exactly. That is not negotiation. That is the price of admission. Understood? Yes, Corporal, understood. They met Kowalski at the armory ruins, or what was left of them. The building had collapsed in on itself, but the demolitions cage in the basement was reinforced concrete and steel. Some of it survived. Kowalski had managed to salvage demo charges from the wreckage. His face was black with soot, and his hands were bleeding, but he grinned when he saw them. Ready to blow some stuff up, Morrison? Always wanted to try combat engineering. Well, today is your lucky day. I got enough C4 here to flatten a city block. Question is where to put it. They moved fast through the chaos, staying low, using smoke and fire for concealment, moving from cover to cover like Bull was taught, like Rodriguez taught, like every sergeant who ever kept soldiers alive taught. The sound of the approaching BTRs grew louder. Diesel engines and grinding treads. The sound of doom rolling toward them on steel wheels. The Killbox Valley was maybe 200 meters long, with steep sides of loose rock and scrub. Shale and sandstone. Unstable. Perfect for what Jake had in mind. If they could bring those sides down while the vehicles were inside, the armor would be trapped, buried, neutralized. The men inside killed without Jake having to look them in the eyes. "Where do we place the charges?" Kowalski asked, studying the terrain with a professional eye. Jake pointed. "Here, here, and here, support points, load-bearing positions. When they blow, the whole hillside should come down. Physics and gravity do the rest." "Should?" "I am not a geologist, Frank, but it is our best shot, only shot, really." They split up, Kowalski taking the west side with practiced efficiency, Jake and Danny the east, each with enough C4 to bring down a building, or a hillside, or nothing at all if Jake's battlefield calculus was wrong. If the rock was more stable than it looked, if the explosions were not synchronized, if any of a dozen things went wrong. Jake climbed, hands finding holes in rock and dirt, boots slipping on loose shale, Danny right behind him, breathing hard but keeping up. Below, the first BTR entered the valley, then the second, moving in convoy formation, confident and unstoppable, turrets traversing, looking for targets, not seeing the two soldiers above them, clinging to the rock face like insects. Jake reached the support point, a boulder the size of a car wedged in place by centuries of erosion and luck. Take it out and everything above it would follow. He hoped, he prayed, he placed the charge. His hands moved automatically, training taking over. Mold the C4 into the crack, insert the detonator, check the connection, prime the firing circuit, check it again. Bull's voice echoing in his head. Measure twice, blow once, because you do not get a second chance with explosives. Danny was watching the valley, his face pale. "Corporal, they are almost through." "How many inside?" "5 vehicles, 3 still outside." Not ideal. Jake had wanted all 8 in the kill zone. But war was not ideal. War was making do with what you had and hoping it was enough. "Get down, behind that rock. Cover your ears and open your mouth." "Why open my mouth?" "Overpressure keeps your eardrums from rupturing, trust me." Jake hit the radio. "Kowalski, you set?" "Affirmative. On your mark, Corporal." Jake took one last look at the BTRs crawling through the valley like metal beetles. Thought about all the men inside them. Soldiers following orders. Some of them probably decent guys who had families waiting at home. Wives who would get folded flags. Children who would grow up without fathers. Parents who would bury sons. War made you do terrible things to people who did not deserve them. He pushed the thought away. Those soldiers chose to attack Fort Carson. Chose to come here and kill Americans. Chose wrong, and now they would pay for that choice. "Kowalski, 3, 2, 1, execute." He pressed the detonator. The world split open. The explosion was not loud. It was absolute. A physical force that slapped Jake backward, drove the air from his lungs, made his bones vibrate like tuning forks. The hillside simply ceased to exist as a hillside and became something else. Avalanche, landslide, rockslide. Tons of stone and dirt and debris roaring downward with the inevitability of God's own hammer. The BTRs disappeared, swallowed whole, metal screaming as thousands of pounds of stone crushed armor like tinfoil. Men inside never had a chance to scream, never knew what hit them, just alive 1 second and buried the next under weight that nothing human could lift. When the dust settled, the valley was gone. In its place, a new landscape of rubble and destruction. 5 BTRs buried so deep they would not be excavated for months. Maybe years, maybe never. A tomb for men whose names Jake would never know. Danny stared with wide eyes, his face gray with shock. Holy Mother of God. Jake felt sick, hollow. He had just killed dozens of men. Quick deaths, probably. Instantaneous. Better than bleeding out or burning alive. But still, dozens of fathers and sons and brothers gone because he pressed a button and knew which rocks to blow. This was what Rodriguez had tried to protect him from. Not death, not combat, the burden of causing it. The weight of playing God and deciding who lived and who died. "Come on," Jake said quietly. "We need to move. Now." They climbed down, met Kowalski at the valley entrance. The staff sergeant looked at the destruction, then at Jake. Something like respect in his eyes. or maybe recognition, one soldier acknowledging another. Morrison, I owe you an apology. For what? For calling you a coward, for thinking you were just some washout playing soldier, for not seeing what was right in front of me. Kowalski extended his hand. You just saved this base, saved lives. Thank you. Jake took the hand, shook it, felt the weight of it, the meaning, the bridge being built between two men who had been enemies an hour ago. We are not done yet. 3 BTRs still out there, and Volkov still wants me dead. They made it back to the inner perimeter as the enemy assault intensified. The loss of 5 BTRs had not broken the attack. If anything, it made them more determined, more aggressive, more willing to spend lives to achieve the objective, whatever that objective was. Mortars walked across the compound with renewed fury. Machine gun fire raked defensive positions. Soldiers fought back, pouring rounds downrange, but the volume of incoming fire was overwhelming. For every shot they sent out, 100 came back. Bull found Jake at the command post. The master sergeant's face was grim. Blood stained his left sleeve. Shrapnel wound, probably, but he was still moving, still fighting, still leading. We got wounded piling up faster than the medics can handle, ammunition running low, and Hayes just got word that air support is still grounded. Sandstorm up north, maybe 3 more hours. How long can we hold? Hour, maybe 90 minutes if we are lucky and the enemy is stupid. They are not stupid. Jake looked around the command post. Officers and NCOs trying to manage chaos with voices and radios and sheer force of will. Hayes coordinating defenses while bleeding from multiple shrapnel wounds he refused to have treated because the medics had worse cases. Good men doing their best in an impossible situation. His hand went to his chest, to the dog tags he wore under his uniform. Not his own tags. Captain Carlos Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps, blood type O positive, religion Catholic. Jake had taken them from Rodriguez's body after the Syrian ambush, carried them every day since. A reminder of the promise he made to Rodriguez's father. Take care of the men, keep them alive, lead them home. But how do you take care of men who are being slaughtered because of you? Bull noticed. The old sergeant missed nothing. What are you thinking, son? I'm thinking Volkov does not care about Fort Carson. He cares about me. I killed his son. This whole attack is about revenge. Personal. So as long as I am here, he will kill everyone to get to me. Every soldier who dies today dies because I pulled a trigger 2 years ago in Syria. That is on me. Bull's hand shot out faster than a man his age should move, grabbed Jake's collar, pulled him close. The old sergeant's eyes were hard as steel. Do not even finish that thought. Master Sergeant, it is the only way to save these men. By sacrificing yourself? By spitting on everything Rodriguez died for? Bull shook him hard enough to rattle his teeth. Your captain gave his life buying time for his Marines. You think he did that so you could throw your life away on some misguided guilt trip? I have to do something. You are doing something. You are leading. You are fighting. You are keeping your brothers alive. Bull's voice dropped, became almost gentle. Quiet, but more powerful for it. Jake, listen to me. I am old. I have been in more fights than you have had birthdays. I have seen good men die and bad men live and everything in between. And I learned something in Vietnam that took me years to understand. You know what that is? Jake shook his head, not trusting his voice. Warriors die. That is the job. That is what we sign up for. We put on the uniform knowing we might not take it off. Rodriguez knew it. I know it. You know it. But we do not die because we gave up. We die because we fought, because we stood when others ran, because we bought time for our brothers, even if it cost everything. Bull released Jake's collar, straightened it with rough gentleness. Rodriguez would not want you to surrender. He would want you to fight, to lead these men, to be the warrior he saw in you. Can you do that? Jake thought about it, about Rodriguez bleeding out in Syria while Jake listened on the radio, about Bull standing here at 58 with a shrapnel wound and gray in his hair, still fighting, still leading, about Danny and Kowalski and Hayes and all the soldiers fighting and dying not because they wanted to, but because it was their job and they refused to abandon it. Yes, Master Sergeant, I can do that. Good, now get back to your rifle. We have more bad guys to shoot. The battle raged on. Jake back at his sniper position, working methodically. One shot, one decision. Danny beside him, calling ranges, learning to be steady under fire. Learning that fear was normal, but you could fight through it. Kowalski rallying infantry squads, his earlier hostility replaced by respect and brotherhood. Bull everywhere at once, a force of nature in combat boots and BDUs. And slowly and possibly they held. The enemy lost momentum. Their casualties mounted. The destroyed BTRs had been a psychological blow as much as a tactical one. The precision sniper fire was taking a toll on leadership, forcing junior soldiers to make decisions they were not trained for. Professional soldiers started to question whether this contract was worth dying for. Then everything changed. A voice over the radio, not American, not Russian, something else. Middle Eastern accent, cold and professional and somehow worse than the violence because it was calculated. Businesslike. Attention, Fort Carson. My name is not important. What is important is that you understand the situation. Colonel Volkov's personal vendetta was convenient cover for the real operation. While your forces were engaged with his revenge fantasy, my team achieved our actual objective. Hayes grabbed the radio, his knuckles white. Who is this? I am the man who just made you very uncomfortable, Colonel Hayes. You see, Fort Carson has something valuable. Classified weapons in your testing vault, experimental equipment worth millions on the black market, prototypes that certain governments would pay dearly to examine. That is what this attack was always about. Volkov's vendetta was just a convenient distraction, a way to draw your attention while we completed the real mission. The command post went silent, every eye on Hayes, every face showing the same thing: horror, understanding, the realization that they had been played. You are bluffing, Hayes said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Check your security monitors. Oh, wait, those are all destroyed. Convenient, yes? Let me help you out. Vault door 7, sublevel 3. My men are there right now, cutting through your locks. We will be gone in 15 minutes with enough technology to shift the balance of power in 3 separate conflicts. And you cannot stop us because you are busy fighting Volkov's disposable soldiers. Brilliant, is it not? The Russians are so predictable. Give them revenge and they will die for it while the real work gets done. Hayes turned to his aide, a young captain who looked like he might throw up. Get security to the vault, now. Sir, we do not have enough men. Everyone is on the line. If we pull them, the perimeter collapses. An explosion, deep underground, felt more than heard, the kind of shaped charge that could cut through hardened steel like butter. The voice laughed, cold and clinical. Too late, Colonel. By the time your people arrive, my team will be extracting with the merchandise. And you will have lost not just men, but your career. Imagine the headlines: experimental weapons stolen from under the nose of Fort Carson's commander. The Pentagon will crucify you. Senators will demand hearings. Your name will be synonymous with failure. How does that feel? Jake looked at Bull, at Kowalski, at Danny. Understanding passed between them without words, without radio traffic. The kind of understanding that came from shared combat. How many men in the vault? Jake asked into the radio. The voice paused, surprised. Excuse me? In the vault, how many? Why would I tell you that? Because you are proud. Because you already won and you want us to know it. You want us to understand how badly we got played. So how many? A chuckle. Appreciative. Professional acknowledging professional. 8. 8 of the best operators money can buy. Former SAS, Spetsnaz, Navy SEALs. Men who have forgotten more about combat than you will ever know. The elite of the elite. Against whatever exhausted, depleted forces you have left. I would wish you luck, but it would be pointless. The radio cut off, static, silence. Hayes looked at Jake like a drowning man looking at a life raft. You have an idea. Yes, sir, a terrible one. Let us hear it. The vault is underground, limited access points, confined space. If we can get there before they extract, we can trap them inside, negate their training with close quarters combat, turn their elite skills into a liability. That is suicide. No, sir, that is infantry combat. And we are infantry. Jake stood, slinging his rifle. Kowalski, you know the vault layout. Did security training there last year? Yeah, I know it. 2 main entrances, 1 maintenance access. Tight quarters, limited sight lines. Danny, you willing to follow me into hell? The kid swallowed hard, nodded. His hands had stopped shaking. Something had changed in the last hour. He was not the scared private anymore. He was becoming a soldier. Jake looked at Bull. Master Sergeant. Bull grinned, a warrior's grin. The same grin he probably wore at Quezon when the NVA came, and death seemed certain, but Marine stood anyway. Son, I have followed dumber orders. Let us go get our stuff back. Hayes made the call, his voice carrying the weight of command. Morrison, you have tactical command of the vault assault. Get our weapons back, stop those mercenaries. And Corporal? Sir, do not get yourself killed. That is an order. We are going to need you when this is over. They moved fast through the base. 4 men against 8. Bad odds in any math. But Jake had learned something in Fallujah and Syria and everywhere else he fought. Skill mattered more than numbers. Courage mattered more than equipment. And brothers fighting together mattered more than anything. The vault entrance was a smoking ruin. The heavy door blown clean off its hinges, twisted metal curled back like flower petals. Inside, darkness and the echo of voices speaking Russian and English and Arabic, professionals coordinating extraction. Efficient, practiced, men who had done this before in other countries, other vaults, other thefts. Jake signaled to halt. Hand signals only. No noise, no mistakes. One sound and 8 elite operators would be ready, would be waiting. Kowalski pointed to a secondary entrance. Maintenance access, smaller. Unguarded because why would you guard what the target does not know exists? They could come in from an unexpected angle. Surprise would last maybe 5 seconds. 5 seconds to turn the fight before they got cut down. Jake nodded. They moved. The maintenance corridor was cramped and dark. Jake went first, rifle up and ready. Behind him, Bull with a shotgun that looked like it belonged in a museum but killed just as well as modern weapons. Then Kowalski with his M4, Danny at the rear with a pistol and more courage than sense. They emerged into the vault sublevel, massive space filled with equipment, crates, and shadows. Dim emergency lighting casting everything in shades of red and black. The 8 operators were 30 meters away, loading stolen weapons into packs. Professional, efficient, not expecting resistance because the intelligence said all forces were committed to perimeter defense. Intelligence was wrong. Jake raised his hand, counted down, 3, 2, 1. FBI, drop your weapons! It was a lie, of course, but it bought them a half second of confusion. A half second where the operators turned to look instead of shooting. Enough. Jake fired. Center mass. The closest operator went down. Bull's shotgun roared like thunder in the confined space. Another man fell. Kowalski's M4 chattered. Controlled bursts, suppressing fire, forcing them to cover. Then hell erupted. The operators were everything the voice said. Elite, trained, deadly. They scattered to cover like mercury, returned fire with devastating accuracy. These were not regular soldiers. These were professionals who lived and breathed combat, who had survived wars in places most people could not find on a map. Bullets screamed through the vault, ricocheting off metal, punching through crates. Wood splintered. Concrete chips flew. The air filled with smoke and noise, and the particular smell of gunfire in enclosed spaces. Danny cried out, hit in the shoulder, not fatal but painful, blood blossoming across his uniform. He dropped behind a concrete pillar, clutching the wound, his face white with shock. Jake rolled to new cover. These men were not like the soldiers outside. They were equals, maybe better. This was not a battle they could win through skill alone. They needed luck, tactics, and a willingness to do whatever it took. But they did not need to win. They just needed to delay long enough for help to arrive. Jake keyed his radio. Hayes, we are in contact, heavy contact. Need backup at the vault. Copy. Sending what we can spare. Hold on, Morrison. Hold on. Easy to say when you were not being shot at by the best soldiers money could buy. The firefight was brutal and close. No room for fancy tactics. No time for planning. Just violence and luck and will. Jake fired, moved, fired again. Bull fought like a demon, his years falling away in the heat of combat, becoming the young Marine who survived Quezon. Kowalski covered their flanks, his engineering background helping him read the space and predict enemy movements. 2 operators down, 3, but they were taking fire too, taking hits. Bull caught a round in his leg. Went down with a curse that would have made his mother cry. Kowalski dragged him to cover, tied off the wound with quick efficiency. I am fine, Bull roared, his face twisted with pain and rage. Keep fighting. 5 operators left. Professional respect in their eyes now. They had expected easy targets, found warriors instead. The kind of men who did not quit even when they should. The leader of the group called out, accent British, former SAS for sure. You are good, mate, better than expected. But you are outnumbered and outgunned. Walk away and live. We got what we came for. No need for more dying. Counter-proposal, Jake shouted back. You surrender and we do not kill you. Clock's ticking and you know it. Help is coming. A laugh. Genuine amusement. American bravado, I respect it, but futile. Then something changed. Jake heard it before he saw it. The sound of running boots. Radio chatter. Reinforcements arriving. Not just a few soldiers. A lot. Hayes had stripped the perimeter, gambled everything on stopping this theft. The British operators swore, looked at his team, saw the same realization in their eyes. The job was blown. No extraction, no escape, just death or surrender. All right, Yank, you win this one. Do not shoot. We are coming out. They came out slowly, hands up, weapons down, 5 elite operators looking angry but professional. You win some, you lose some. That is the game. Better to live and fight another day than die for a paycheck. Jake kept his rifle up until military police took custody. Only then did he lower it. Let out a breath he had been holding for what felt like hours. His hands shook. Post-combat tremors. Every soldier got them. Bull was being treated by medics. The leg wound was clean, through and through, missing bone. He would live to fight another day. He saw Jake and grinned through the pain. Not bad, Corporal. Not bad at all. Danny sat against the wall, his shoulder bandaged, looking shell-shocked but alive, color returning to his face. Kowalski stood next to him, a protective hand on the kid's good shoulder. Hayes approached, looked at the captured operators, at the recovered weapons, at Jake and his team. The colonel's expression was unreadable. Then he saluted. Jake returned it, surprised. Good work, Corporal Morrison. You saved this base twice today. I will not forget it. None of us will. Thank you, sir. But it was not just me, it was all of us. That is what makes you a leader, son. Knowing it is never about one man, it is about the team, the brothers who stand together. They walked out of the vault together, back into daylight that seemed too bright after the darkness underground. The base was still burning in places, still smoking, still broken, but it was standing. They had held. Jake found a quiet spot away from the activity, sat down hard. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion and pain in the shakes. His hands trembled. His legs felt like water, normal reactions to abnormal stress. He pulled out Rodriguez's dog tags, looked at them in the sunlight, the metal warm from his body heat. I kept my promise, Captain, he whispered. Took care of the men, like you asked, like you taught me. A shadow fell over him, Bull leaning on a crutch, his leg bandaged but his eyes clear. You did good today, Jake, real good. We lost men, Master Sergeant, 23 at least, maybe more when they finish counting. We always do, but we saved more than we lost. That is what counts. That is what you remember when the nightmares come. Jake looked up at the old sergeant. Does it ever get easier, the weight of it? Bull sat down next to him, slowly, carefully, favoring the wounded leg. No, and if it does, that is when you need to stop being a soldier, because the weight reminds us that what we do matters, that every life matters. Every choice has consequences. He looked at Rodriguez's tags. Your captain knew that, died knowing it, died buying time for you to become the man you needed to be, and now you know it too. I wish I could have saved him. I know, but you saved Danny today, and Kowalski, and me, you stubborn son of a gun, and a whole base full of soldiers who will go home to their families because you stood and fought and refused to quit. Bull's hand came down on Jake's shoulder. Heavy, warm, real. Rodriguez would be proud, son. Proud of the warrior you became. I know I am. Jake felt something break inside. Not collapse. Release. The wall he had built around his grief cracking. Tears came, hot and unexpected and needed. For Rodriguez. For the men he killed today. For the men he saved. For all of it. Bull did not say anything. Just sat there, his hand steady on Jake's shoulder, letting him have his moment. The way sergeants had done for crying soldiers since the first war. Sometimes being a warrior meant holding another warrior while he broke, and that was okay. When it passed, Jake wiped his eyes, felt somehow lighter. The burden still there, but shareable now, not something he had to carry alone. Thank you, Master Sergeant. Bull. They sat in silence, watching the sun climb higher. Around them, the base began to recover. Medics treating wounded, engineers assessing damage, soldiers helping soldiers. The work of survival and rebuilding. Kowalski approached with Danny in tow. The staff sergeant's expression was serious, searching. Morrison, got something to tell you, something I should have told you before. What is it? Kowalski seemed to be struggling with words, wrestling with pride and shame. Finally got them out. My brother, Danny Kowalski, Lance Corporal, USMC, he served in Fallujah 2004, got pinned down with his unit in a building. 12 Marines thought they were going to die. Said a sniper saved them from a rooftop 600 yards out. 12 shots, 12 kills. Impossible shooting. The kind you tell stories about. Kowalski met Jake's eyes. That was you, was not it? You were Reaper. Jake remembered. The building. The Marines with death closing in. The impossible distance and the wind that kept shifting, and the way his spotter said it could not be done. But he did it anyway. Because he was Reaper, and that was his job. Saving brothers from death. Yeah, that was me. Kowalski's jaw worked. My brother talks about that day. About the sniper who saved his life. About the guardian angel he never saw, but who bought him time to get home to his wife and kids. I have 4 nephews because of you, Morrison. 4 boys who got to know their father because you took those shots when no one else could. He extended his hand. I owe you an apology. Several, actually. I called you a coward. Called you a washout. Said you did not belong here. I was wrong. Dead wrong. You are a warrior. A real one. The kind men follow into hell because they know you will lead them out. And I would be honored to call you brother. Jake took the hand, shook it firmly, felt the weight of forgiveness, of acceptance, of brotherhood earned through fire. Brothers, then. Brothers? Danny cleared his throat. Corporal Morrison? I wanted to say, today was the most terrified I have ever been in my entire life, but also the proudest, because I fought next to real soldiers, next to you and Master Sergeant Jackson and Staff Sergeant Kowalski, next to warriors. He came to attention despite the pain, saluted with his good arm. Thank you for not giving up on me, sir, for believing I could do it even when I did not believe it myself. Jake returned the salute. Danny, you brought me my rifle when the world was exploding around you. That takes guts, real guts. You are going to be just fine, better than fine. The radio crackled. Hayes's voice, tired but satisfied. The voice of a commander who fought and won. All units, enemy forces are withdrawing. Repeat, hostiles are pulling back. We held the line. Fort Carson stands. A cheer went up across the base, not loud. Everyone was too exhausted, but heartfelt, real. The sound of men who survived against the odds and could not quite believe it. Bull struggled to his feet. Jake helped him up, supporting the old sergeant's weight. Come on, old man. Let us get you to the hospital. Old man, I was outrunning you half the day. You were also out wounded. Leg first, argument later. Bull laughed. Actually laughed. True enough, damn leg hurts like hell. They walked together toward the medical area. Around them, Fort Carson slowly came back to life. Damaged but not broken. Bloodied but not beaten. Still standing because warriors refused to let it fall. And Jake Morrison, the Marine reject, the troublemaker, the man who reported his own officer and paid the price, walked with his head high. Not because he had proved anything to anyone else, but because he had finally proved something to himself. He could keep the promise. He could take care of his brothers. He could be the warrior Rodriguez always saw in him. The battle was not over. Volkov was still out there. The man behind the real attack, the voice on the radio, had escaped. There would be more fights, more dangers, more hard days ahead. But today they won. Today they held. Today they were brothers in arms, and that made all the difference. As they reached the hospital, Bull stopped. Looked at Jake seriously with those eyes that had seen too much. You know what happens next, do not you? What is that, Master Sergeant? This attack was personal. Volkov will not give up. He will come for you again. And next time he will be smarter, more prepared, more ruthless. Men like him do not quit. They just regroup. I know. So what are you going to do? Jake looked back into the base, at the soldiers helping each other, at Danny and Kowalski standing together, former enemies now brothers, at all the men who fought today because they chose to stand when they could have run. I am going to be ready, and when he comes, I will not be alone. I will have brothers, and that is what makes warriors unbreakable. Bull smiled, proud, satisfied. That is the right answer, son. That is exactly the right answer. They went inside. The medics fussed over Bull's leg while Jake sat in a corner, finally allowing himself to rest. His body ached everywhere, his hands still shook. But his mind was clear. His purpose was clear. He thought about Rodriguez, about promises kept and debts repaid, about the long road from Fallujah to Fort Carson, about all the ghosts he carried and the brothers he saved. And for the first time in 2 years, Jake Morrison felt something he had not allowed himself to feel. Hope, not because the war was over. Wars were never over, but because he finally knew what he was fighting for. Not glory, not revenge, not even redemption. Brothers, simple as that. Brothers who needed him, brothers he would die for, brothers who would die for him. The weight of Rodriguez's dog tags pressed against his chest. A reminder, a promise, a purpose. Outside, the sun continued to climb. Fort Carson burned and smoked and bled. But it stood, and as long as it stood, as long as there were warriors willing to fight for it, willing to stand when others ran, willing to be brothers in arms, then hope survived. And where hope survived, warriors thrived. Jake closed his eyes, let exhaustion take him for a moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new battles to fight. But tonight they had won, and that was enough. For now, that was everything. 3 weeks passed before Jake Morrison slept without nightmares. Not 3 days, 3 weeks. Because healing takes time and bodies remember trauma even when minds try to forget. Fort Carson stood wounded but defiant against the Colorado sky, and every morning Jake woke to the sound of reconstruction. Hammers, drills, the steady rhythm of soldiers rebuilding what violence had torn down. The casualty reports were final now. 23 dead, 47 wounded. Could have been worse. Should have been worse. But warriors had stood, and standing made the difference between tragedy and catastrophe. Jake spent those 3 weeks working, not because anyone ordered him to, because his hands needed something to do and his mind needed to stay busy. He helped rebuild defensive positions, carried supplies to medical, wrote letters to families of the fallen, even though that was an officer's job. Bull taught him that warriors took care of their own, living and dead. On the 22nd morning, Jake stood at the memorial wall where photographs of the dead hung in simple frames. 23 faces, some he knew. Private Chen, who always saved extra bacon for Danny. Sergeant Williams, who could fix any vehicle with duct tape and profanity. Lieutenant Carson, who had 2 daughters and coached Little League. All of them soldiers who answered when duty called. He added names to the list he kept in his notebook, the same list that started with Captain Carlos Rodriguez. Names of men who died while Jake lived. Not guilt anymore, just remembrance, just the weight that kept him honest. Talking to ghosts again, Bull Jackson approached on crutches, his wounded leg healing, but still tender. The old sergeant had refused a wheelchair with language that made the nurses blush and the doctors laugh. Said he walked into Vietnam on 2 legs and he would walk out of Colorado the same way, even if one leg was being stubborn about it. Just remembering, Master Sergeant. Bull! Bull! They stood together in silence. The morning sun painted the mountains golden red, beautiful and indifferent to human suffering. The mountains were here before soldiers, would be here after. That thought comforted Jake somehow. Permanence beyond the temporary violence of men. You hear about the investigation? Bull asked, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. What investigation? Army brass came through last week. Senators too. CIA, FBI, everyone with initials and authority. Bull shifted his weight, grimacing. They want to know how a training base in friendly territory got attacked by 400 professional soldiers, how classified weapons almost got stolen, how 23 Americans died on American soil, and they want someone's head on a platter. Hayes? Was going to be Hayes, commander's responsibility and all that, but then something interesting happened. Bull's expression was unreadable. Remember that voice on the radio? The one who said Volkov was just a distraction? Jake's jaw tightened. The one who got away with the real mission. That is the one. His name is Karim al-Rashid, former Iraqi intelligence. Worked for Saddam, then went private when the regime fell. Runs a mercenary logistics network that moves weapons and tech for the highest bidder. Very good at disappearing, until last week. What happened last week? FBI and CIA Joint Task Force caught him trying to board a private jet in Mexico City, had 2 of the stolen prototypes with him. Seems his extraction did not go as smooth as he thought. Your team damaged more equipment than he realized. Only got away with 2 functional units instead of 8. Not worth the money he was promised. Got sloppy. Got caught. Bull smiled grimly. They are going to bury him under a black site so deep he will never see daylight. And suddenly Hayes looks like a hero who fought off a complex international conspiracy. Politics is funny that way. Jake felt something loosen in his chest. Not satisfaction exactly, but closure. The man who orchestrated the real attack was caught. Justice served, or as close to justice as the world allowed. What about Volkov? Bull's expression darkened. That is why I came to find you. Hayes got intel. We know where Volkov is. The world seemed to slow down. Jake had known this moment would come, felt it in his bones the way you feel weather changing. Volkov would not give up, could not give up. This was about honor now, about a father avenging his son, about debts that could only be paid in blood. Where? 40 miles north, old mining complex in the mountains, abandoned since the 70s. Perfect place to hide and regroup. Bull's eyes were serious. He has maybe 40 men left. The survivors from the attack. They are not planning another assault. They are just waiting. Waiting for what? For you, son. Specifically for you. Jake let that sink in. Volkov sitting in the mountains with 40 battle-hardened mercenaries, waiting for one man. Not attacking, not running, just waiting with the patience of a hunter who knows his prey will come. What does Command want? Command wants this over. Clean and quiet. No more international incidents. No more dead soldiers. They are sending a Special Forces unit to take Volkov into custody. Delta or maybe DevGru, the quiet professionals. Bull paused. But the unit will not arrive for 3 days. Weather is bad up north. Snow coming in. Helicopters are grounded until it clears. 3 days is a long time for Volkov to plan something. Exactly, which is why Hayes is asking for volunteers. Small team to conduct reconnaissance. Eyes on target. Nothing more. Just make sure Volkov does not disappear before the professionals arrive. Bull's voice made it clear what he thought of that official line. Unofficially, this is your chance to end it. Face him, finish it, before more soldiers die for one man's revenge. Hayes is giving me the choice. Hayes is giving you the rope. Whether you hang yourself or climb out is up to you. Jake looked at the memorial wall, at Rodriguez's photograph forever frozen at 38, at the 23 new faces who died because Volkov wanted revenge, at the weight of responsibility that came with being the center of someone else's hatred. I volunteer. Bull nodded like he expected nothing less. Danny and Kowalski already volunteered too. Said they owe you a debt. Said brothers do not let brothers go alone. Bull, your leg is still healing. I have another one. Besides, someone needs to keep you from doing anything too heroic. Old sergeants are good at that. They geared up in the armory. Jake chose his father's M40 rifle, cleaned and zeroed and ready. Bull carried a modified M4 with a grenade launcher because old men with experience were more dangerous than young men with courage. Danny had a designated marksman rifle, surprised they trusted him with it, but determined to prove worthy. Kowalski loaded up with more ammunition than seemed reasonable and a combat shotgun that looked like it could stop a truck. You planning to fight an army? Jake asked. Kowalski grinned, the old hostility completely gone. Just being prepared, you know what they say, better to have it and not need it. I think that is about condoms, Frank. Applies to ammunition too. They drove north in an unmarked Humvee, keeping to back roads and forestry trails. No official vehicles, no insignia. If something went wrong, the Army could deny knowledge. Plausible deniability, the way governments pretended their hands stayed clean. The landscape grew wilder as they climbed. Ponderosa pines giving way to aspens, then to bare rock and snow. The mining complex was at 9,000 feet, where the air thinned and breath came harder and men had to work for oxygen. Bull navigated using a map older than Danny, paper and pencil, no GPS, no electronic signatures. If Volkov had surveillance, they would ghost right past it. Tell me about Syria, Kowalski said as they drove, breaking the silence. What really happened with Volkov's son? The whole story. Jake did not want to talk about it, but these men were going into danger because of him. They deserved to know the full truth, all of it, not just the parts that made him look good. My team was Force Recon Marines. Deep insertion, high-value targets. Best of the best, they told us. We got tasked with hitting a weapons depot supposedly run by ISIS. Intelligence said light security. A milk run. Jake stared out the window at passing trees, seeing Syria instead of Colorado. Intelligence was wrong. It was a trap. Russian contractors working for the highest bidder. Spetsnaz trained, professional-grade soldiers who made insurgents look like children. Volkov's men, Bull said. His son commanded them, Alexei Volkov, 22 years old, good soldier, smart, trained by his father since childhood in tactics, in strategy, and how to win. Jake's hands tightened on his rifle. We walked into an ambush. Perfect setup. They knew we were coming, knew our route, knew our timing. Someone sold us out. The Humvee hit a pothole. No one spoke, waiting. Captain Rodriguez ordered an immediate retreat, said he would cover us, give us time to break contact and disappear. I wanted to go back for him. My team stopped me, pinned me down, told me orders were orders, told me Rodriguez was making his choice and we had to respect it. Jake's jaw clenched. So we listened to the whole thing on enemy radio. Rodriguez fighting, running out of ammunition, getting captured. They tortured him for intel, grid coordinates, unit strength, communications frequencies. He gave them nothing, just kept telling them his name, rank, serial number. Over and over until his voice broke and he could barely whisper. Danny looked pale. Kowalski's hands were white-knuckled on his rifle. Then Alexei Volkov executed him. I heard it over the radio. Clean shot, professional, no cruelty, no malice, just war. Just an enemy commander doing his job. So why does Volkov blame you? Danny asked quietly. Because 2 weeks later, we got another mission. Hit the same group while they relocated equipment. This time we had real intel, good positioning. We caught them in the open. I was on overwatch with my rifle. Had Alexei in my scope at 800 meters. Perfect conditions. Slight wind, good light, easy shot for someone like me. Jake closed his eyes, seeing it again. The young Russian commander directing his men with hand signals. Confident, capable. Someone's son, someone's brother, someone's future. I took the shot. Alexei went down. Through the scope, I saw his father run to him, saw Volkov kneeling over his son's body, and through his radio, still set to the frequency we monitored, I heard him scream. A father's scream, the worst sound in the world. Raw and broken and full of a grief no parent should know. He knew it was you? Kowalski asked. He knew. Figured it out somehow. Maybe recognized my pattern. Maybe had intel of his own. He made a promise over the open channel. Said he would find me. Said he would make me suffer like he suffered. Said he would take everything from me like I took everything from him. Jake opened his eyes. And then it got worse. How could it get worse? I reported my lieutenant for refusing to attempt Rodriguez's rescue, filed an official complaint. The Corps investigated, reviewed the mission, determined that a rescue attempt was feasible and should have been authorized. Lieutenant got reprimanded, I got vindicated. Jake's voice was flat, and then I got destroyed. The lieutenant had friends, colonels, generals, people who cared more about protecting one of their own than about justice. They made my life hell. Called me a troublemaker, a whistleblower, someone who could not be trusted, transferred me out of Force Recon, out of the Marines entirely, gave me an honorable discharge in an Army assignment, and sent me somewhere I could not cause problems. So Volkov did not need to take everything from you, Bull said softly. The Marines did it for him. Exactly. I lost my team, my career, my identity, everything I worked for since I was 16. All because I told the truth about a man who let Rodriguez die to save his own ass from a bad decision. Kowalski whistled low. That is one hell of a story. And now you are going to face Volkov. Look him in the eye. What are you going to say? Jake thought about it. The truth, that his son died a warrior, that I carry that weight, that revenge will not heal his wound, and that I am tired of running from ghosts. They reached the mining complex at sunset. Abandoned buildings clinging to the mountainside like rust-colored scabs. Tailings piles and collapsed tunnels. Equipment left to rot when the silver ran out and the company moved on. Perfect place for an army that did not officially exist to hide from a world that wanted to forget them. Jake glassed the complex through binoculars. Counted men? identified positions, spotted weaknesses in the defensive setup. Old habits from his Marine recon days, habits that kept you alive when everything else failed. I count maybe 35 hostiles, he reported. Sentries rotating every 2 hours. Command post in the main building. Vehicles staged for rapid extraction. They are ready to move fast if they need to. So they are not planning to stay, Kowalski observed. No, they are waiting for something. Orders maybe. Transport. Or, Jake lowered the binoculars, met Bull's eyes. Or me. Volkov knows I will come. He has been waiting for me to walk into his trap. That is why he has not moved, not run. He wants this confrontation as much as I do. Danny looked nervous, his wounded shoulder still bandaged. So what do we do? Jake made a decision, the kind that defined who you were and who you wanted to be. I am going to walk in the front door, alone, unarmed except for my sidearm. Request parley, soldier to soldier, face to face. That is suicide, Kowalski said flatly. Maybe, but it is also the only way this ends without more men dying, more brothers bleeding, more families destroyed. Jake checked his sidearm, made sure it was loaded but holstered. Volkov wants me. Fine, he can have me, but on my terms. No ambushes, no Fort Carsons, no innocent soldiers caught in crossfire. Just two men settling a debt the old way, with honor. Bull's jaw tightened, the old sergeant's face showing his years. And if he just shoots you on sight, then you shoot him. Complete the mission. Go home. Tell Hayes that Morrison died trying to prevent another attack. Make me useful even in death. Like hell, Bull growled. Rodriguez died buying time for his men. You think I am going to let you waste that sacrifice by giving up now, after everything? Master Sergeant, he will kill everyone if I do not end this. You know that. I know that. This is not suicide. This is tactics. I draw him out, you get positioning. If things go wrong, you have the high ground and the element of surprise. Hayes's voice had been clear before they left. Observe only. Do not engage unless necessary. But Hayes also knew what he was sending them to do, what Jake was going to do. And the colonel had not stopped him, had not forbidden it, had just said one thing, come back alive. All of you. This is insane, Kowalski said, but he said it with respect. Like he understood that sometimes insane was the only option that made sense in an insane situation. Probably, Jake agreed, but I am tired of running from ghosts, tired of carrying guilt for things I cannot change, tired of watching good men die for my mistakes. So I am going to face Volkov, look him in the eye, and maybe if I am very lucky and God is paying attention, find a way to end this that does not require more killing, more death, more families destroyed. Bull gripped his shoulder hard, the way fathers grip sons before they go to war. You are a good man, Jake Morrison. Better than most, better than this world deserves. Rodriguez would be proud. Hell, I am proud. But if Volkov even looks at you wrong, if I even think he is going to hurt you, I am putting a round through his skull. Understood? Understood, Master Sergeant. Bull? Bull. They planned it carefully. Bull and Kowalski would circle around to the north, get elevation, cover the command building from two angles with overlapping fields of fire. Danny would stay on overwatch from the southern ridge with his designated marksman rifle. 3 shooters, 3 angles, 35 targets if everything went to hell. Jake would walk in alone, hands visible, weapons holstered, a white cloth tied to his rifle barrel. A warrior offering parley the way warriors had since before recorded history. Sometimes the old ways were best. Sometimes going back to basics was the only way forward. This is insane, Kowalski said again. But he said it while checking his rifle, while preparing to cover Jake's approach, while getting ready to die if that was what brotherhood required. Probably, Jake said, but I'm going anyway. Bull gripped his shoulder one more time. You come back from this, son. You hear me? You come back. I did not spend 3 weeks teaching you how to lead just to watch you throw it away on some gesture. I will do my best, Bull. Your best better be damn good. They moved into position as full darkness fell. Jake gave them 30 minutes to get set, checked his watch, breathed deep, felt the cold mountain air fill his lungs, thought about his father, dead before Jake could remember him, thought about Rodriguez and Alexei and all the men this war had consumed, thought about what Bull said. Warriors die, that is the job. But we die fighting, not surrendering. Jake was not surrendering. He was engaging on his terms. He walked down the mountain toward the mining complex. No stealth, no tactics. Just one soldier approaching another's camp with a white flag, as warriors had done since the First War. His hands were raised, empty, visible. His sidearm remained holstered. He was not here to fight. He was here to talk. Sentries saw him immediately, shouted warnings in Russian and English and other languages. Rifles trained on his chest, a dozen laser sights painting red dots across his body. One word from Volkov and Jake would be cut down before he took another step. "I am Corporal Jake Morrison, United States Army," Jake called out, his voice steady and loud. "I am here to speak with Colonel Viktor Volkov. I request parley under flag of truce." Silence, then movement. Men parting like a curtain, a figure emerging from the command building. Tall, broad-shouldered, hair more gray than black, a face carved from Siberian granite, hard and unforgiving, but somehow still human underneath. Colonel Viktor Volkov stepped into the light cast by generator-powered floods. He was older than Jake expected, 55 at least. Old enough to be Jake's father. Old enough to have fought in wars Jake only read about in history books. Afghanistan in the 80s against the Mujahideen. Chechnya in the 90s against rebels. Georgia. Syria. A lifetime of combat etched in scars in the way he moved, economical and dangerous even in stillness. They stared at each other across 30 meters of frozen ground. Two warriors. Two men who had killed and would kill again if required. Two fathers, one actual and one potential, bound by the death of a son. "So," Volkov said. His English was good, accent thick but clear. Years of working with international contractors had smoothed some edges. "The killer of my son comes to me, bold or stupid. I have not decided which. Neither. Just tired of running. Tired of this hanging between us like smoke." Volkov's eyes narrowed, studying, assessing. "You should have kept running, should have disappeared, changed your name, lived in fear for the rest of your days. That was the sentence I gave you. Fear and isolation and knowing I was always hunting. I do not run anymore. I face my mistakes. I face my ghosts. I face you." Brave words. But words are wind. They mean nothing without action behind them. Volkov descended steps carved into the rock. Walked toward Jake slowly, deliberately. His men tensed, ready to fire on command. "You took my son, my Alexei, my pride, my future. You took everything that mattered, everything that made my life worth living. Your son died a soldier's death, fighting for what he believed in. I gave him a clean kill. No suffering, no torture. That is respect between warriors. That is honor." Volkov's hand moved fast, faster than Jake expected from a man his age. The punch caught him across the jaw, spinning him sideways. Jake tasted blood. Did not fight back. Took the blow because Volkov had earned it, had earned more than that. "Respect!" Volkov roared, his voice breaking with rage and grief. "You speak to me of respect? You are the sniper who shoots from shadows, the coward who kills from distance. Where is the respect in hiding 800 meters away and pulling a trigger? Where is the honor in that?" Jake straightened, spit blood into the snow, met Volkov's eyes without flinching. "Your son would not want this, would not want you destroying yourself for revenge, destroying other families, killing other sons. Do not speak of him. You have no right. You did not know him. You did not raise him. You just ended him. I have every right. I killed him. I carry that. Every day, every night. His face in my scope is burned into my memory. His death on my conscience like a brand. I carry it all. The weight of ending a good man's life because war demanded it." Jake's voice was steady, hard, true. "Just like you carry Rodriguez, the captain your son executed. We both carry ghosts, Colonel. Question is, do we let them make us monsters, or do we honor them by being better men than our worst moments?" Volkov stared. Something shifted in his eyes, rage warring with something else. Pain, grief, recognition. The human underneath the soldier breaking through the armor. "Alexei kept a journal," Volkov said quietly, his voice dropping. "He wrote in it every night, every mission, every thought. I read it after he died, every entry, every word, looking for him in the pages, looking for my son." Volkov's voice cracked. "He wrote about you, about the American sniper who was his enemy. He wrote that he saw honor in your eyes through his scope during an earlier engagement, that you could have killed him then but hesitated, that if he died, he hoped it would be by your hand because you were a warrior like him, someone who understood. Jake felt his throat tighten, had not known about the journal, had not known that Alexei saw him as anything but an enemy. He did not fear you, Volkov continued, his eyes wet. He respected you, admired your skill, wrote that you were the kind of enemy that made you better, that forced you to elevate your game. And I have dishonored that respect by hunting you like an animal, by attacking your base, by killing your brothers, by becoming the monster he would have been ashamed to call father. Volkov looked older suddenly, tired, broken, the weight of his choices crushing him. I thought revenge would heal the wound in my heart, would make the pain stop, would bring him back somehow. But it only made the wound deeper, made me into something he would not recognize, something evil. It is not too late to stop, to choose differently, to honor him by living well instead of dying badly. Yes, it is too late. Volkov's hand moved to his sidearm, drew it slowly. I have killed 23 Americans, attacked a military base, murdered soldiers who were just doing their jobs. There is no coming back from this, no redemption. Your government will hunt me. Russian government has disavowed me. I am a dead man walking. The only question is how I die. He raised the pistol, not toward Jake, toward his own head. But before I die, I want you to know something. My son died well. You gave him that. A clean death while protecting his men. That is all a father can hope for. That his son dies with honor. Thank you for that gift. And now I will give you a similar gift. You will not have to carry my death. I will do it myself. Colonel, no! Jake lunged forward. Everything happened at once. Volkov's finger tightening on the trigger. Jake diving, covering the distance in seconds, hitting Volkov's arm as the pistol fired. The bullet screaming into darkness. Both men hitting the ground hard. They grappled. Old soldier versus young. Experience versus desperation. Volkov was strong, trained, deadly even at 55. But Jake fought with purpose. Not to kill, to save. To prove that one death did not require another. That the cycle could break here tonight with two men choosing differently. Let me die, Volkov roared, his voice breaking. Let me have this honor. This is all I have left. There is no honor in suicide, only waste. Only more pain for everyone who cared about you. Jake pinned Volkov's arm, stripped him the pistol, threw it into the darkness. Your son died protecting others. Honor him by protecting others. By living. By being the man he wrote about in his journal. Be the father he loved, not the killer he never was. Volkov stopped fighting, collapsed, broke, great sobs shaking his body. A father's grief finally released after months of being buried under rage and plans and violence. I miss him, Volkov wept, tears freezing on his face in the mountain cold. I miss my boy, my Alexei, my son, my future, everything. Jake knelt beside him, put a hand on the old soldier's shoulder. Let him grieve, because sometimes that was all you could do. Bear witness to another man's pain. Hold space for grief too large for one person to carry. Volkov's men lowered their weapons, confused, lost, their commander broken before them. Not sure what to do when the mission was revenge, and revenge suddenly meant nothing. Bull approached carefully from the north, Kowalski at his side, both with rifles ready but not aimed. Reading the situation, understanding that something fundamental had shifted. It is over, Jake said. Everyone stand down. No more fighting, no more dying. Hayes' voice crackled over Jake's radio. Morrison status report. Jake keyed his mic. Target secured, no casualties. Requesting immediate extraction and medical. Multiple surrendering commands requiring custody. And sir? Yes, Corporal? Send someone from the chaplain's office. We have men here who need more than handcuffs. They need help. Roger, helicopters inbound. ETA 20 minutes. Excellent work, son. Your father would be proud. Jake helped Volkov to his feet. The Russian looked broken, defeated, but also somehow lighter. Like confession had lifted weight he carried too long. Like speaking his son's name in grief instead of rage had freed something trapped inside. What happens now? Volkov asked, his voice hoarse. Now you face justice, trial, prison probably. But you will be alive. You will have time to process, to heal, to remember your son the right way. And maybe someday you will tell your wife you tried to honor Alexei the only way you knew how. And maybe she will forgive you. Maybe you will forgive yourself. I do not deserve forgiveness. None of us do. But we ask for it anyway. We try anyway. Because that is what makes us human and not monsters. That is what separates warriors from killers. The helicopters arrived with spotlights that turned night into day and soldiers who were professional and efficient. Military police took Volkov and his men into custody, calm, respectful, no brutality, just process. The machinery of justice grinding forward. As MPs led Volkov away in restraints, the Russians stopped, turned, looked back at Jake with eyes that held something other than hatred. Thank you for saving my life when you could have let me die, for honoring my son with your words and your actions, for showing me that warriors can also be merciful. That strength includes knowing when not to kill. Volkov's voice was quiet, sincere. Alexei would have liked you. In another world, another time, you might have been friends. Jake nodded, said nothing. What was there to say? Sometimes silence was the only honest response. Bull appeared at his shoulder as the helicopters lifted off, carrying prisoners and answers to questions Brass would spend months asking. You did good, son, real good, better than good. You did something rare and beautiful. You showed mercy when no one would have blamed you for violence. That takes courage most men do not have. I did not do anything special. Just talked. Just chose differently. Exactly. Most soldiers know how to fight. Very few know how to make peace. You made peace today, saved lives, ended a war before it could start again. That takes a rare kind of courage, the hardest kind. Jake felt exhausted, drained, but also whole in a way he had not felt since Syria, since Rodriguez, since everything went wrong and he stopped trusting himself. Bull? Yeah, son. Thank you for everything, for believing in me when no one else did, for teaching me what it means to be a warrior, for showing me that strength is not just about fighting, but about knowing when to stop fighting. Bull smiled, the kind of smile that made decades disappear. You learned it yourself, Jake. I just pointed the way. But you walked the path. You made the choices. You became the man Rodriguez always knew you could be. He clapped Jake on the shoulder. Come on, let us go home. They flew back to Fort Carson as dawn broke over the Rockies, pink and gold light painting snow-covered peaks. Beautiful. Peaceful. The kind of morning that made you forget about war and death and all the hard things soldiers carry. The kind of morning that made you remember why you fought, what you protected, who you served. The base greeted them with quiet respect. No cheering, no celebration, just acknowledgement, nods from passing soldiers, salutes from young lieutenants, recognition that something important happened, and these were the men who made it happen. Hayes met them at the landing pad. The colonel looked better, rested, younger, like weight had lifted from him too. The prisoners are being processed. Army intelligence wants to debrief you all. CIA wants to talk about Volkov. FBI wants to coordinate about al-Rashid, but that can wait until tomorrow. You earned rest. Hayes looked at Jake. I heard what you did up there, how you talked Volkov down, saved his life after he tried to take yours, after he attacked this base and killed 23 of our soldiers. That takes character, Corporal. Real character. Just did what felt right, sir. Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes that is everything. Hayes pulled an envelope from his jacket. Official seal, important papers. This came through yesterday from the Pentagon. They have been reviewing the attack, your actions, the defense you coordinated, the leadership you demonstrated. Jake took the envelope with hands that trembled slightly. Opened it. Read words that changed everything. Silver Star for gallantry in action against an armed enemy. Battlefield promotion to sergeant. An official invitation to return to Marine Corps Force Recon with full reinstatement of rank and honors. All charges dismissed from your record. All reprimands expunged. Full vindication. Hayes smiled. Congratulations, Sergeant Morrison. The Corps wants you back. The Army wants to keep you. You get to choose your future. Jake stared at the letter, at words that meant his career was back, his honor restored. Everything he lost returned with interest. The Marines wanted him. The elite units wanted him. Everything he worked for since he was 16 years old, offered back on a silver platter. Sir, I do not know what to say. Say yes. Say you will accept. Say you will keep being the soldier we need, the leader we need. Say you will keep making us proud. Jake thought about it, about the Rangers, about Force Recon, about going back to the life he loved, elite, respected. The kind of soldier who did impossible things in impossible places, everything he thought he wanted. Then he looked past Hayes, at Bull standing there with his crutches, pride shining in his eyes. At Danny, now Corporal Martinez, standing straighter and more confident than the scared kid 3 weeks ago. At Kowalski, his former enemy, now his brother. At Fort Carson, and the soldiers rebuilding it brick by brick. His brothers, his family. The men he fought beside and nearly died for, and who nearly died for him. Sir, with respect, I decline the reinstatement to Marines. Hayes blinked. You what? I decline. I want to stay here at Fort Carson with these men if you will have me. But why? Force Recon is everything you wanted, everything you lost. Why would you turn that down? No, sir, it was everything I thought I wanted. But what I actually want is right here. Teaching, leading, training the next generation of soldiers. Taking care of men who need someone to believe in them the way Bull believed in me. The way Rodriguez believed in me. Jake smiled. Bull taught me that warriors are not just fighters. We are mentors, protectors, builders. I can do more good here, training hundreds of soldiers over the years, than I ever could in Force Recon training with a dozen elite operators. Bull's eyes shone with pride. Danny grinned. Kowalski nodded approval. Hayes studied Jake for a long moment, then smiled. Really smiled. I hoped you would say that. We need good sergeants, men who lead by example, men who understand that this job is not about glory or medals or headlines. It is about service, about making soldiers better, about building a military that protects what matters. He extended his hand. Welcome home, Sergeant Morrison. Fort Carson is lucky to have you. They shook hands, soldier to soldier, brothers in arms. 3 months later, Fort Carson had healed. New barracks stood where old ones burned. The memorial wall grew with photographs of the fallen, but the base lived on, stronger, harder, wiser, carrying scars but wearing them with pride. Sergeant Jake Morrison stood on the rifle range, watching new recruits sight their weapons, teaching them breath control, trigger discipline, the mechanics of staying alive when bullets fly, the philosophy of when to shoot and when to talk, the difference between killing and murdering. Corporal Danny Martinez was his assistant instructor now. The scared kid was gone. In his place, a confident young NCO who remembered fear but refused to let it control him, who had been through fire and come out tempered. Staff Sergeant Kowalski ran the defensive tactics course. His earlier hostility toward Jake had transformed into fierce loyalty. They trained together, drank together, told stories about Fallujah and Fort Carson, and all the close calls that make soldiers either brothers or ghosts. Bull Jackson had retired finally. The leg healed, but he admitted the years were catching up. He bought a cabin 15 miles from base, close enough to visit weekly, far enough to have peace. He came to the range every Wednesday to watch Jake teach. Never said much, just smiled and nodded and occasionally corrected a recruit's grip or stance. On this particular Wednesday, a young private approached Jake nervously, fresh from basic training, baby-faced, trying hard to look tough but still soft around the edges. The kind of kid Jake had been once. Sergeant Morrison, can I ask you something? Go ahead, Private. Is it true you saved Fort Carson? That you fought 400 enemies and won? That you talked down a Russian colonel and prevented another attack? The guys in my barracks tell all these stories. Jake smiled. Stories grew in the telling. Legends formed from moments of fear and choice. No, Private, I did not save Fort Carson alone. We saved it. Every soldier who stood, every man who refused to run. That is what makes a military strong. Not individuals, not heroes. Brotherhood. But the stories say you are a hero. Jake thought about Rodriguez, about Bull's wisdom, about Volkov and his son, and the cycle of violence that nearly consumed them all, about mercy and choice, and the difference between glory and service. Heroes are just regular soldiers who did what needed doing when it needed doing, who stood when standing was hard, who protected their brothers because that is what warriors do. Nothing special, nothing magic, just showing up and choosing to be better than your worst impulses. He looked at the young private with steady eyes. You want to be a hero, Private? Yes, Sergeant. Then learn to shoot straight. Learn to think clearly under pressure. Learn to lead by example. Learn to put your brothers before yourself. Learn to choose mercy when you can, and violence only when you must. That is all heroism is. Service, sacrifice, and showing up every single day ready to do the hard right thing instead of the easy wrong thing. The private nodded slowly, trying to understand, trying to see past the legend to the lesson underneath. Now get back on that line and show me a grouping worth bragging about. Yes, Sergeant. As the private ran off, Bull appeared at Jake's elbow, moving slower now but still solid, still present, still the rock Jake built his new life on. You sound like a teacher, Bull observed. I had a good one. The kid asked if you are a hero, and I told him the truth. Heroes are just soldiers who refuse to quit, who keep showing up, who do the job even when no one is watching. Bull nodded slowly. Rodriguez would be proud of you, Jake, really proud. You became the man he saw in you, the leader he knew you could be. You honored his sacrifice by becoming worth it. Jake pulled out the dog tags he still wore under his uniform, still carried, not as penance anymore, as reminder, as connection to the man who taught him what it meant to lead, what it meant to serve, what it meant to be a warrior who built instead of just destroyed. I kept my promise, Bull. I took care of the men, just like Rodriguez asked, just like you taught me. You did more than that. You showed them what warriors really are. Not killers, protectors, not destroyers, builders, mentors, men who understand that real strength includes mercy. That is your legacy, son. Not the battles you won, not the awards you earned. The lives you saved, the soldiers you trained, the brotherhood you built, the peace you made when violence was easier. They stood together, watching recruits shoot, missing more than they hit at first. Learning, growing, becoming the warriors Fort Carson needed them to be. Becoming the next generation who would stand when others ran. Jake Morrison was not a Marine anymore. Not Reaper. Not the killer from Shadows. He was something better. Something Rodriguez and Bull and all the good sergeants before him understood in their bones. He was a teacher, a mentor, a builder of warriors, a brother in arms. And when the next battle came, when the next threat emerged, when the next young soldier needed someone to believe in them, Jake would be ready. Not because he was a hero, but because he was a warrior, and warriors protect their brothers. Always. Forever. No matter the cost. That night, alone in his quarters, Jake wrote 2 letters. The first was to Mrs. Rodriguez, long overdue, 3 years late, but necessary. Dear Mrs. Rodriguez, he began, my name is Sergeant Jake Morrison. I served with your husband, Captain Carlos Rodriguez, in Syria 3 years ago. I was there when he died. I know this letter comes very late, too late, but I wanted you to know that your husband saved my life, not just in Syria, but every day since. His example, his leadership, his sacrifice, his belief in me when I did not believe in myself. They made me the man I am today. They taught me what it means to serve, to lead, to protect brothers who need protecting. I carry his dog tags. I will carry them until the day I die, not as burden, as honor, as reminder of the best man I ever knew. I am sorry for your loss. I am deeply, truly sorry I could not save him. But I promise you this with everything I am. I will spend the rest of my life honoring his memory, by training soldiers, by keeping them safe, by teaching them that warriors are not just fighters. We are protectors, builders, mentors. Your husband protected me when I needed it. Now I protect others. That is how I honor him. That is how I keep my promise. Thank you for sharing him with the Marines. Thank you for raising a man worth following. He died a hero, and I will make sure everyone knows it. With deepest respect and eternal gratitude, Sergeant Jake Morrison. The second letter was shorter. To Colonel Victor Volkov, currently held at an undisclosed location awaiting trial. Colonel Volkov, Jake wrote, I do not know if you will receive this or if they will let you read it. But I wanted you to know something. Your son Alexei was a good soldier, a warrior. He died protecting his men the same way my Captain Rodriguez died protecting his. They would have respected each other. In another world, they might have been friends. I carry Rodriguez, you carry Alexei. We both carry weight that never gets lighter. But we can carry it with honor. We can honor them by living well, by being men they would be proud to call father and son and friend. I hope you find peace, Colonel. I hope you find a way to forgive yourself. I hope you remember Alexei with love instead of rage. And I hope someday you understand that the greatest revenge is living well and becoming better than your worst moment. Your son deserved a father who could do that. I hope you become him. Respectfully, Sergeant Jake Morrison. He sealed both letters, would mail them tomorrow, knew they would not change the past, would not bring anyone back. But maybe they would bring some small measure of comfort, some small measure of peace, some small measure of closure to wounds that never fully healed, but could be stitched enough to live with. Jake stood and walked to his window, looked out at Fort Carson sleeping under stars. Lights glowing in barracks, sentries walking their posts, the eternal rhythm of military life continuing regardless of individual drama. The machine moving forward because it had to. Somewhere out there, Danny slept with the confidence of a young man who found his courage and his calling. Kowalski planned tomorrow's training with the dedication of a soldier who found his purpose in his peace. Bull sat in his cabin with bourbon and memories, satisfied with a job well done and a legacy secure. Hayes commanded with the wisdom of a leader who survived politics and combat and came out knowing what mattered. And 23 photographs hung on the memorial wall, forever watching over the base they died defending. Jake touched the dog tags around his neck, felt their weight, their meaning, their promise. "Thank you, Captain," he whispered into the darkness, "for everything, for teaching me, for trusting me, for showing me what warriors really are, for believing in me when I was broken and lost and angry, for seeing past my failures to who I could become. I hope I am making you proud. I hope I am worthy of the sacrifice you made. I hope I am becoming the man you always saw in me." The tags were silent, but Jake felt answer anyway, in the steady beat of his heart, in the purpose that filled his days, in the knowledge that he was finally truly the man Rodriguez always believed he could be. Not perfect, not fearless, not without scars or doubts or nightmares that still came sometimes, but a warrior, a brother, a man who stood when others ran, a teacher who built up instead of tearing down, a leader who understood that real strength included mercy. And that was enough. That was everything. Jake Morrison turned from the window, climbed into bed, and for the first time since Syria, slept deeply and peacefully without nightmares. Because the ghosts were not gone. They never would be. But they were not enemies anymore. They were companions, reminders, guides showing him the path forward toward being better. And tomorrow, when the sun rose over the Rockies and Fort Carson woke to another day, Jake would be on that rifle range again, teaching, leading, protecting, building, doing what warriors do, taking care of his brothers, one bullet, one lesson, one choice, one life at a time, forever and always, until the last breath. The end.